Today I'm going to talk to James Meadway, a radical economist who's been involved in studying the global economy and the European economy over some years. We live in a world where we are constantly told, including after the 2008 crash, that the only alternative available is the old neoliberal alternative, which was put into place by Thatcher and Reagan and then followed in Britain by Blair, in France and other countries, and the United States by successive political leaders. And the nervousness after 2008 was calmed down considerably by the use of taxpayers' money to pay trillions to effectively bail out the banks. Many people in the United States and in Europe and elsewhere felt that not all these banks deserved to be bailed out. Only recently in Iceland, several leading bankers have been arrested for economic crimes and locked up, to the delight of that population. In Wall Street and the City of London, no such action was taken, and in many cases, those who were responsible for the crisis were effectively ignored. James, very good to have you with us. Let's start by discussing the state of the economy. I mean, quite a number of economists, and not on the left or radical economists, are predicting that far from being over and that another crisis could erupt without warning very rapidly.
Well, I think that's a very fair assessment, and you're right about economists. If you take an extraordinary speech by Andrew Haldane, who is chief economist at the Bank of England. Now, this is not a particularly radical institution, but just a few weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, talking about the third wave of crisis that we're now entering. The first wave, the sort of Anglo-American crash, 2008, 2009. Then you've got the Eurozone crisis, 2009 through to 2012. And now this third wave, the emerging market crisis, centered really on China, now the world's second largest economy, breaking out this year with the stock market bubble popping in Shanghai over the summer. Millions of people facing a crisis there and destitution, and seemingly the Chinese authorities not able to get on top of it.
What would be the impact of a Chinese recession on the global economy?
Well, this is the second largest economy on the planet now. So automatically, if it wobbles at all, this has an impact elsewhere. So the fact that the Chinese economy is slowing down means that suddenly, for instance, Australia was getting pushed closer and closer into crisis. You can see the same thing in East Asia, again, dependent on selling into China, raw materials, for example, all sorts of things. Once that market starts to shrink, they get affected. And you can see it in Germany as well. Germany is a huge export economy, only just overtaken by China, actually, as the world's largest exporter. One of its biggest growth markets for a good number of years now, 10 years or more, has been China, and the demand for capital goods, for machinery, for equipment. That slows down, Germany gets hit. Now, the one that's interesting in all of this, of course, is Britain, where we've seen our political leadership, George Osborne, David Cameron, rolling out the red carpet for Xi Jinping when he visited here, insisting that China is a country we're happy to do business with, allowing the Chinese to come and say they will build, along with the French state, a nuclear power plant in Britain for the first time for decades. Which country has the largest single financial exposure to China, outside of China, who has loaned the most money to China? That's Britain, where you've got $500 billion worth of debt that British banks have racked up against people in China. If that wobbles, that debt is suddenly exposed.
Given this, given the fact that many economists are saying this, James, why is the political class so slow in assimilating it? You'd have thought that they have learned something from the 2008 crash. We did shake them.
Yes.
So given that, why don't they take this threat more seriously?
I think in part for someone like Britain in particular, there is, as far as our political class, our elite are concerned, there isn't very much else to do at this point. Why is Britain still a great power in any sense? Well, one, it does have a large military, which it has tried to use successfully. Two, it has the City of London, it has financial services, it has a major hub of the world's financial system sitting right in the middle of this city. And if it loses that, what are you left with in Britain? I mean, what industry is there? What else do we have to sell the world? So you look after that. And if that means bailing out those financial services when they spectacularly trash the rest of the economy, you know, to the tune of 1.2 trillion pounds is the IMF's estimate for the cost of the bailouts here. When they drag you into a massive recession, you pay for those costs and you carry on paying for those costs and you don't care about anything else because this is the only thing that matters. So you cling on to it. So the model doesn't change. And what we've done over the last few years is spend an incredible amount of money and resources, and invented all sorts of other excuses. This is why we have austerity. You know, blame the people on welfare, blame the people on benefits. Don't blame the bankers, because they have to be protected. That's what this is all about.
Okay, now let's talk concrete things. Let's suppose, by some freak chance, a government is elected in this country at the next general election, which wants to break with neoliberalism. What would be the first measures such a government would take in order to end the Thatcher-Blair era forever?
I think at the heart of what you try and do is, to put it crudely, you want to invest, you want to spend money, you want to build things that have some kind of view on the future that isn't just, let's hope that financial services will carry us through forevermore. So that would mean infrastructure investment in Britain. That would mean investing in scientific research. One of the things you'd certainly want to do is be very clear about where you're going to invest, what you're going to invest in, one part. The second part is, okay, how do you raise the funds for that? Well, you can borrow cheaply if you're the government, very cheaply if you're the government here. But also, you need to start to address seriously the incredible concentration of wealth. There is a huge amount of resources, of wealth in the hands of very, very few and increasingly few people, and they are not spending that money. Large UK corporations are sitting on about £700 billion worth of money in their bank accounts that they're not spending. So you have to try and force them to behave differently.
But how could one do that?
Well, taxes would be the obvious one. You can tax, I think, but also I think there's an issue here that you can certainly adjust some of what is an international tax system and a system of tax evasion that you'd have to start to clamp down on. And there are some relatively simple things that almost any country can do that don't really get done at the minute. For instance, where do corporations claim their profits? Yeah. Do you claim your profits in some offshore location, or do you insist that your profits are being made where you make the sales and that's where you'll be taxed? You can do these things. In the case of Britain, it does have jurisdiction over a number of these tax havens. So you want to start chasing these things up and start to clamp down on them. That you could do if you had a government committed to it.
But the argument used against what you're proposing by, obviously, the financial press, which is totally pro-capitalist, and politicians in hoc to it, is that if Britain or any other country were to do it on their own, these people would just take their money and plonk it somewhere else. And so better it's in tax havens under our control because we know how much it is on that money. And they could zip off to another part of the world where different laws apply. And why shouldn't they do that rather than stay here? This is what the Greeks threatened to do if the Greek government had stayed on course, saying, okay, we'll take our money away.
Well, this is capital flight. No, this is historically what always happens. I think there's two parts to this. One is that, look, if it's in a tax haven, this is useless capital anyway. For the public good, it's doing nothing whatsoever. Because it's in a tax haven, it's not paying taxes. No. And it's nice for the billionaire who happens to hold this account. It's useless, really, for the rest of us. So that's to one side. The harder part is, what about actual productive investment here? In which case you'd say, well, look, this is a huge market. It's a huge developed economy. If you're investing here, part of what you want to do is sell things here. It's no good saying, if you're a large retailer, we're being taxed more, we're just going to close down all our shops and go somewhere else. You can't do that. No. You have to be here. So capital, real productive capital, is significantly less mobile than the kind of funny money and the stuff that ends up in tax havens. You can clamp down on these things. I think what's starting to happen in terms of neoliberalism, less so in the developed world, but you start to see it in the rest of the world, which is now the majority of the global economy is not in the historic centres of capitalism anymore, is that the argument about capital controls has come back in a big way, that we can't simply allow money to flow wherever it wishes at the flick of a switch and that you have to try and control this stuff. Even the IMF now has a position that says, okay, in emergency, you have to clamp down on hot money flooding across the world. It's totally destabilizing. Well, if that argument works for South America or it works for East Asia, it applies just as much here. It's destabilizing here and we have to learn how to control it.
What are the chances of it?
Of us being able to do this?
Yeah, will we need another crisis to push politicians in that direction?
Well, crisis can act as an opportunity for changing how things think. I mean,
it didn't in 2008.
Well, that's what's striking about 2008. An incredible amount of effort was put in to keep things pretty much exactly as they are, right? So, and we're all paying for that effort. And we're paying for future efforts. I mean, austerity in Britain right now, Osborne increasingly says this. You can see the government's rhetoric has shifted. It's not about dealing with the last crisis, it's in case the next crisis turns up. If the next crisis turns up, we're going to have to bail out the system, we're going to have to pay for a recession. They know that this is bearing down on them because they're not stupid. They know that this is bearing down on them, so you need to clear a bit of space now. So that is, of course, one of the other parts of the argument that I think would have some popular resonance here, is that, look, you're being presented with a choice. It's a political choice. We can either defend the interests of the City of London, this crisis-ridden, this dangerous, risky thing that we claim, or our government claims, is basically everything that we can do and all we can hope for. You can protect that, but that means we pay for it, or you can protect the NHS, you can protect the welfare state. That's a political choice.
I think to defend what you're saying should be defended, like health and education to a certain extent, and more investment in public housing, investment which has virtually seized up over the last decades, wouldn't just require strong-willed politicians, it would require movements from below, as we're seeing in Ireland now with the anti-water privatization movement. And these movements from below are very slow to start. And I often compare, James, the struggle against the privatization of utilities in South America with weak trade unions to a country like Britain, which had strong trade unions, but after the defeat of the miners, the unions more or less got scared, is to put it bluntly, and didn't resist any of the privatizations at all, except in a token way. I mean, industry after industry was privatized. The railways were privatized. No big trade union actions to defend that. So, you know, it's true that young people did something astonishing and voted Jeremy Corbyn in as leader of the Labour Party. But we need to go a bit beyond that in terms of defending some of the things he's promised from below, like renationalizing the railways, creating a people's railway, which would be a start. How confident are you that this might happen?
Well, I think that there's two things. First is that a lot of what, you don't get this from the press, but most of what Jeremy Corbyn has said about the economy is popular.
Supported.
You can find, you know, easily 2/3 of people, upwards of 2/3 will say, let's renationalise the railways. He was elected by a movement. I mean, when you see hundreds, thousands of people turning out to speak, it's a social movement that got him there. And it's a social movement that will enable him to deliver on any of this. I mean, I think it's already having an impact. The fact that you do have Jeremy Corbyn as leader of the Labour Party is clearly having an impact on how British politics is now conducted.
Let's move on now to the global economy. Could you explain what all these deals, the TTIP, other similar deals with different parts of the world mean?
Well, there's two parts to this. The Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnerships, the deal between the US, the United States and the European Union.
Yes.
Conducted pretty much entirely, I mean, this is the EU for you, but almost entirely over the heads of their own citizens, as a comprehensive trade deal that also loads in a whole load of new ways to regulate investment and to control investment and to decide how companies invest, which will be familiar, by the way, for people in the rest of the United States. Or, you know, if you're in Mexico, you'd be familiar with the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Or you'd be familiar maybe with the sort of bilateral investment treaties that the various countries have been sort of pushed into signing over the last few years. So what you have with TTIP, with this US-EU deal, is something like that, but applied to these developed economies, which hasn't really quite happened before. The content of it, the free trade is one thing, That involves getting rid of an awful lot of regulations, potentially in Europe about food standards is one that really concerns people. The really troubling part, I think, the more troubling part, is the creation of an investor-state dispute mechanism. In other words, a slightly technical name, but in other words, you create a kind of parastate body in which a corporation, if it decides it has lost out as a result of a government's decision, can take the government to this kind of quasi-court. There's no other legal backing for this, but you can take that government to court and say, I, or we, as a corporation, have lost money as a result of this decision taken by this government, so we're suing you. And that is a very, very dangerous mechanism.
Well, it's a direct attack on democratic function.
Yes, totally. Look, forget democracy at this point. You may, for instance, the German government, after Fukushima, the nuclear,
stopped it.
Yes, decided no more nuclear power plants to be built. We're going to phase out the power plants that are there. Under the terms of a deal it had signed previously, the ETC, the Energy and Trade Convention, that deal provides for one of these investor-state dispute mechanisms. Vattenfall, a very large, actually state-owned Swedish manufacturer, producer and runner, contractor of nuclear power plants, is suing them for many billions of euros.
Suing the German government. Suing
the German government on the grounds that they took this decision. And they took the decision because it's very popular in Germany.
Yes.
Like you see what happens. You don't want nuclear power plants anymore. The anti-nuclear movement is very large in Germany. They're being sued over the loss of earnings from a decision taken by a democratically elected government. 4 billions of euros, and that dispute is ongoing. So this is what concerns people. Your government can get sued by corporations who are beholden to no democracy in this whatsoever. The court, it's not really a court, but the way they set it up is you have 3 corporate lawyers, maybe a few more, and they just negotiate amongst themselves and come to some deal. Governments can't use this mechanism against corporations. It's one way only. And of course, once you have this mechanism there, every government is going to be terrified that they might be subject to this in the future. So they won't do anything.
So tell me, in the German case, the Swedish company is suing the German government. How far has that case got?
That's ongoing. I mean, it's been rumbling on for a good few years now. They presented the documents, I think, at the end of 2011, and it's still not resolved. So these things go on for a while.
So what will obviously happen is there'll be some deal reached, and the German government won't pay the whole amount demanded, but half or...
Yes, I mean, that's the standard. If your government is reasonably savvy with these things, you might hope to have a kind of negotiated settlement rather than you just lose outright. So presumably they'll negotiate something with this. But even so, why are you paying money to a corporation for a decision that you've taken that is not relating to the things they do in the future, but it's relating to investments they've already got there? The whole thing is crackers. So TTIP puts one of these mechanisms in place, this US-EU deal. The other deal, of course, is the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Yeah.
Which does the same thing, but the other side of the US. It does it for the Pacific and the countries that are signed up there.
So effectively, these new deals give corporations enormous power to deal with governments considered even marginally antagonistic to capital.
That's absolutely it. The idea is to lock permanently in place a particular version of neoliberalism where whatever democracy you have, it is always superseded or potentially superseded by corporate power of a particular kind.
And can a government pull out of this deal unilaterally? Say if it's a deal, let's say this is a deal signed between the United States and the European Union. What if a country pulls out of the European Union? Then the deal's over?
You'd be free to do it. I mean, what has happened certainly over the last 5 or 6 years, maybe going back further than that, is that a large number of countries in the global south, so you're talking South America, East Asia, these sort of places, have been signed up to deals like this, bilateral investment treaties, that have this investor-state dispute mechanism built into them. And they've been tearing them up. Bolivia, Venezuela, Ecuador, all saying we're not going to do it. Brazil refusing to take any part in these things. Yes. Indonesia now is saying that it's going to do something similar. You just tear it up. And you can do that, and then you're no longer subject to the same provisions. So you can reassert yourself against
provided your government decides that's the path you're going to take.
Provided your government says they'll do it. The difficulty in the case of the TTIP deal, the US-EU deal, is that the European Commission, the leading body in the EU, may well try and sign something, although they have to get bits of it ratified through the European Parliament. They said they will do that. It then has to go to individual member states. And if they don't ratify, then frankly the whole thing isn't going to happen at that point.
I mean, a German government ratifying this completely is going to be in trouble.
Yes, you'd have thought so. But I think part of the issue here is not so much that you actually get the deal through, this mega deal, this enormous, comprehensive, all of the trade, all of investment, all of it sorted out, locked in place. It's not so much you get all of that through, it's that you can kind of set the direction for what happens. You may not get everything, but you'll get something. And that starts to chisel away at democratic rights for the countries involved, very, very clearly.
But James, I was also reading a number of sort of longish essays in the American journals and online places, which shows that quite a number of Americans are very hostile to this deal as well, because they say it has a similarly bad effect on us. It stops investment, it does this, it does that. So even though the corporations strongly in favor of it are US corporations, there's complaints coming from their country too.
Oh, absolutely. And you can see why. The experience for ordinary Americans of NAFTA has been pretty atrocious. You know,
large-scale
falling wages, deindustrialization, loss of jobs. So it's a disaster all round. If you're then presented with the same thing again, but bigger and worse, this isn't going to be popular. I mean, even Hillary Clinton, I believe, has now come out and said she's going to oppose the TTIP deal. There's sort of an indication of someone responding to that kind of pressure.
And a sign of popular discontent.
Of course.
Are you hopeful that over the next 5 years, neoliberal capitalism, which is the name given to this particular form of capitalism, can be rolled back?
Oh, I'm confident about that, I'd say.
You think they will?
Yeah, I think we're living in the last years of neoliberalism. We're not in 1989, right? We're in sort of 1988 at this point in time. If you look particularly in Europe, the combination of debt crises, of economic stagnation, of questions about democracy, all of this coming together poses or starts to pose really big issues about how do the institutions that govern us function at all, and fairly fundamental questions about how they function. You see some of that around the EU itself, the debates around how does the European Union operate. It's very anti-democratic, always has been. It's now really neoliberal. I mean, that's a relatively new invention for it, but it's being challenged right the way across Europe. The difficulty for those on the progressive side of things is it's all very well to say these things are challenged. What do you get instead? And that's where the real argument starts to lie. How do we define what the future looks like in a way that doesn't, for instance, collapse into nationalism, xenophobia that you do see on the increase in Europe as a result of the failure of these institutions as much as anything else?
But the old Soviet Union collapsed, obviously, because of a large economic crisis. But also it imploded because the single party in charge effectively lost its nerve, had no alternatives, and the West thought they could control it. I mean, can you see any of the current political parties, the Democrats, Republicans in the States, the Conservatives, Christian Democrats, the bulk of the so-called socialist parties just giving up?
Oh, no, not at all. But the challenge for them, I suspect, if these popular movements continue, and what you're seeing is popular movements against neoliberalism, usually a minority of the population as yet, but you can see it building up. If they respond to it, well, they have two choices about how they respond. One is you smash, the other is you accommodate. Yeah. It's not clear which one wins. And it's not clear what the movement needs to do there. Now, you can see already that there's a degree of attempts being made to accommodate popular movements. Hillary Clinton, as mentioned, saying she's going to oppose TTIP. This is someone who would automatically sign this. I mean, that's who she is.
But she's also on the run from Bernie Sanders.
Yes, of course.
Who's been attacking Capitol, who's been attacking Wall Street, etc.
It was exactly a political expression of that kind of mood. You can draw a line all the way from Bernie Sanders all the way back to Occupy Wall Street and all the way back really to the crash of 2008. If not further, actually, all the way through to the protests against WTO. Many of the ideas involved here in this kind of set of people who've learned how to protest and how to organise have quite a long history. They come out of the anti-war movement in Britain. They come out of the anti-capitalist movement here.
The other side of it, however, in which we can't ignore, is that the success which the EU and the Troika had in basically destroying an elected government in Greece will have demoralized people. And the fact that it wasn't even a straightforward defeat, because defeats one can recover from, but it was a self-inflicted defeat, with Tsipras and Syriza capitulating
Yes.
quite openly,
Yes.
despite a 61% referendum saying fight them.
Yes.
And that will have had a huge impact. And this then raises questions, James, about the way in which the EU is structured
Yes.
today and how it works. Undemocratic, arbitrary, a machine for aiding financialized capitalism, and it rules supreme. They've appointed prime ministers in the past, technocrats in Greece, in Italy, controlled even microfinancing in Ireland and Portugal. So what is to be done about the EU? Because it's not a question you can shy away from. And I think it's very dangerous to have a situation where the only criticism that's coming of the EU is coming from the far right or the conservative right.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I mean, that I think is shifting. I think it's shifting across Europe. The experience of Syriza
Has
in
had an
particular,
impact.
I think it's had a clear impact on the left in Europe when you start to think, if you're confronted here by Nigel Farage, who's against the EU, then you can see a default reaction for people is, well, I don't like Nigel Farage, so the other side can't be too bad. But then the experience of what's happened to Greece, the way that the EU and the institutions of the EU have responded to the Eurozone crisis, and the way they are now responding to the refugee crisis, it's something that you can't, I think, in good faith, simply turn around and say, as a progressive, as someone on the left, this is all fine. We just need to kind of change things around a little bit. I mean, this is the other great white hope, rather, is that somehow the EU will be subject to reform. Well, look, everything over the last 20, 30 years says that it has got progressively worse and worse and worse. Everything. The line of march inside the European Union is set by the European Commission. Parliament's a sideshow, really. It's set by the Commission. The Commission determines the line. The Commission is neoliberal to its very core of its being, and that is what it wants Europe to look like. And there is no plausible route into this to make it behave any other way. So that suggests your only real option here is to say we must be opposed to this institution. The options of reform don't really exist.
I agree with you entirely. And on that, even from the point of view of the hardline capitalists, like, say, the German state and the German government, this volatility and the threat to the euro as a currency must raise questions about the Eurozone, must raise questions about whether it was possible, logically, to create a common currency without a common political structure. It's never been done before. And I have the feeling that the German elite is chafing, which is why Wolfgang Schäuble, the finance minister of Germany, privately or semi-publicly offered the Greeks quite a lot of money to have an amicable Grexit. The Greeks foolishly refused, in my opinion, but that's another question. The real question is, why do the Germans want it? And it's obvious they want some restructuring to happen. Or why should their banks be threatened?
Yes, no, that's exactly it. I think the experiment, and Merkel in particular is in quite deep trouble over this, the experiment with trying to bail out Greece especially, they've kind of managed Spain and Portugal and Ireland somewhat better in all of this. Although I note today that
Portugal is getting troublesome.
Portugal is getting troublesome. The government that was voted in on a minority basis has now been pushed out of office just this morning. So they are having issues all over, but it was Greece that Merkel staked her reputation on. We will bail it out, everything will be fine. We'll get the money back, no losses, everything's back to normal by whenever, 2015, let's say 2016. It hasn't happened, it isn't going to happen. The terms now being applied to Greece are frankly inviting rejection at some point, which will happen, and Greece will be out of the Eurozone. And Merkel and her side of the argument in the German ruling party, I think, is severely damaged. The side that starts to win is the fiscal conservatives, it's the Wolfgang Schäuble, it's the people who have a belief that the Eurozone could be restructured in such a way as to make it far more fiscally conservative, really a union of northern countries who can be trusted to look after their money, that's how they put it. And this will involve much less risk for German capital and German taxpayers, and they'll be quite happy with some exits. It'll be chaos for a bit, but we'll get through it. That, I think, is their vision of how the world will operate.
James Meadway, very good talking to you, and we'll talk again.
Thank you.
Thanks.